Welcome to the Underdog Sniper Podcast. This is episode 53. Welcome to this week's podcast. My name is MGCovers. Greatly appreciate you guys tuning in. I like to cover here. This is my third week in Dominican, and I have some personal updates. I actually made it to 11 o'clock last night before I went to bed, which was really good for me. If you don't know the climate here, it's so different. It's very, very, very hot, and it takes a while for your body to, I guess, get acclimated to the climate. And of course, I play golf every day. And usually there's times I went to bed. I've went to bed at like 9 o'clock a couple of times here in the last 2 weeks, sometimes 9:30. And then I was starting to average 10. And then last night I made it all the way to 11:15. So I feel like my body is starting to get acclimated to this climate. And then I usually wake up 5:30, somewhere in that neighborhood. That was like a huge accomplishment to make it to 11 o'clock last night, but still loving life. All is good here. In this week's podcast, we got a lot to cover. We're going to talk about NBA season wrapped up. So we're going to review the model for NBA, see the actual numbers. We were positive in NBA, which is so rare. I can't remember really having any kind of financial gains in NBA in the past. Usually we make profit early in the year and then, of course, lose it all late. And obviously that was almost true to some degree, but this model sustained, units and win percentage all the way through almost to the end of the season. We'll look at that. We're also going to look at MLB totals, show you the progress we've made here to start the season. Had a very successful preseason. We'll take a look at those numbers. And then we're going to close up the podcast. We're going to look at some statistical properties for Major League Baseball. I'll show you a few things that I think are real unique that you might be able to incorporate into your handicapping to help you get a little bit better. All right, so let's dive into it. Let's take a look at this model here. Now, what's interesting about NBA, I'm almost embarrassed to tell you this, and I've shared this on social a few times, is that when I made these changes to this NBA model, which was basically January 1st, I really didn't think this model would work. Like, I did not believe we would have any success. I just tracked wins and losses and no units gained. Now, what I would do, what I want to share first is that I was real strict in how I graded this. So if a team was 5.5 or less points, if it was an underdog plus 5.5, I played that on the money line as far as like counted on the log. So if a team was +4, even if they covered, but if they didn't win the game, I graded as a loss. So there's actually some money line dog wins in here. Now, money underdogs cash at about 30% in NBA, which is a lot lower, 10% lower than what you see in NHL and MLB, which cash at about 40%. But there's still a significant amount of underdogs in here, and shame on me for not tracking it. I should have, but I know this model was successful. So we made these changes January 1st, and you can see here the amount of volume. It's generally about 2 to 3 plays. And the way I would play this, you look over here to the left, we would play double-digit favorites via my model, meaning they had to have had to be at least a -10 favorite via my model. In addition to that, they had to have at least a 5-point margin with the books line. So if our line was -10, the closing line, I graded off a bookmaker's closing line, had to be at least -5 so that we had significant margin. And that's a really good way because I've said this before, and just a reminder, like you look at here, I think this is games from 4/13, maybe the last day of the year, last game of the season. When you look at this one here where it says Clippers -5, there's always going to be a margin of error in your model. So when you look at a line, let's say your line is -5, that line technically could be -7. Your line, it could be -3. So in order to compensate for that margin of error, I just played teams that were -10. So that factor in the margin of error, that could mean that team is -13, your model, maybe even -7, so that it overcomes the quote margin of error, so to speak. And hopefully that makes sense. So we want to play quote good teams via the model. And that's one way you can do it when you're setting up your stat models, is to play teams. You've seen what we've done in MLB. You can also do it with spread sports as well. You just play teams with the largest spread. All right. Now let's go down and look at this from January 1st to the All-Star break. It went 37 and 27. Yeah, 2-11. That was the last day for the All-Star break. And then post All-Star break, and this is where I really thought the model would lose its edge, so to speak, and not be as profitable. I mean, it started out kind of shaky there, 0-3, 0-2, and then went 2-0, 1-0, 3-2. Kind of went through a rough run there. And then you can see here in March, it really took off. 3-1, 1-0, 4-0, 0-2, 1-1, 0-2. And then it ended up finishing 67 and 52. Let me just run this. I think this is is that right at 60%? I think that's right. Hang on one sec. 67 plus 52, 67 divided by 119. Y'all, 56% for NBA, which is like, man, that's really good. And that would, if you factor in juice, meaning if you just grade it as though you played every game on the spread line, assuming minus 110 juice, so you'd have to add 552 plus 5.2 and juice, that would be right at 67. So it, even at that would net out 10 units. So that was just from January 1st to March 31st. So if we go back and let's say we add in November and December, I mean, this thing has the potential, even factor in moneyline dogs, this might be a 20 unit sport, for the entire season. So we'll definitely start with this once we have sufficient data for the model. I think NBA season starts mid-October. So probably, November 1st, this model should be a green light go as far as the model and wagering, because now we have a pretty significant sample size. I don't think we would make any changes to this. And we have some back testing with it as well, actually live. So really excited about NBA for next year. All right, let's make a transition into MLB totals. So these are totals year to date for the regular season. 13-6, 6.6 units gained, and it had its first big day 3-0. Totals has yet to have a losing day. 410 started on 410, tracking 1-0, 3-3, 4-1, 2-2, and 3-0. If you're new to the podcast, this is not my model. This is one of my stat model clients' models that he's worked really hard on. I started to share this once we had some success with it. And if you're interested in learning how to build models with me, I teach a stat model coaching class, or it's basically one-on-one coaching. There's a link to get more information in the description. We're getting ready to open up second quarter. I had 5 clients in the first quarter. I'm going to make a few changes to that. And if you sign up for the email list, you'll get information about how to become a client if you're interested in having me coach you, teach you how to build models. So 13-6, 6.6, and you can look at spring training here. 40 and 27, it was up 10.3 units, and that was from 310 to 324. That was 60% totals, which is just amazing, with a 15% ROI. So literally in 2 weeks, it hit 10 units, and now it's already up to 6 units. You're looking at 16 units and just a little over a 1 month span for totals, which is amazing. And I've never been somebody that's really a quote totals modeler, somebody that models totals. I've had success with NHL in the past. Some of you remember that from a couple of years ago, but we were using a statistical property. They made changes in NHL and overs were cashing like crazy. Books weren't really adjusting. They were laying out 6.5 lines for totals. We were playing over, and over from the second half NHL season went on this like 60% tear. But again, we were factoring in statistical properties. And if you look at statistical properties, let me pull this up for for MLB. And this is covers.com. They show it as trends. And you can see right here, look at totals, 49% for overs and 49.8% for overs and 50.2% for unders. So statistical property wise, there's no advantage. And a lot of times when you have success with totals, you're aligning your wagers with the statistical properties. For example, not this past year, but the previous 2 years in NFL, all those unders were cashing. Defenses adjusted, started playing at 2-man under. They wouldn't give up any 60-yard bombs, played real conservative on defense, made it difficult to score, made it difficult for games to go over. Unders were cashing like crazy, well over, 55%. But there's no statistical advantage for MLB, but this just goes to show how sharp this model really is, and super excited. And what I don't want to do now is I don't want to not take advantage of this. So we've had, this thing's up 16 units since March the 3rd. So it's obvious it's working. How long will it work into the season? Because again, all this is new, but I've said this before, there's going to be risks that you take in life, in sports betting, etc. You drive to work every day, you're taking a risk. If you get on an airplane, you're taking a risk. There's risk in everything, meaning like we have sufficient data to know that this works. We can play it. But what I don't want to do, there's also risk in not playing it, meaning like if you don't start playing this, this thing could end up, 30 units by July 1st. And we've sat there and watched this model just cash. I'm definitely going to dive into totals. And I'm also going to share with you how I'm going to structure this with MLB wagering sides. And you can see there, this was preseason for sides 10-8, 4.38, 19.5% ROI. And we're positive wagering. Year to date, we had a big win we had 2 big days yesterday. Yes, yesterday 2-0 day, and previous day we cashed like 3 dogs, had 6 plays, so up about $1,700 in the last 2 days just with MLB. So I think what I'm going to do is, let me pull this up. These are lines for today, so you get a little sneak peek at the lines here for today, and I'll go ahead and show you the totals plays for today. So we have Detroit, Milwaukee. That's going to be an overplay. Angels and Texas going to be an over. Chicago and San Diego will be an over. So those are the 3 totals plays. And then, of course, you have top 10 via the model as well as bottom 7. Now, what I'm going to do, again, you only have a limited amount of games you can play, and you have to factor in what gives you the biggest edge. Originally, I thought about playing the top 6 teams, and then if any of those top 6 teams are playing a top 10, that would be a pass. So I'm going to do that. But what I'm going to pass on is we're not going to do the play against concept, because I feel like totals obviously is a lot sharper than the bottom 7. So what I might end up doing is devoting a full unit, which would be $1,000 to sides, and then a full unit to totals as well, and then see how that goes, and then make adjustments from there. But the model that we've had success with the last 2 years for sides looks like it's going to be really good again this year. You're always concerned going into a new year that the way the pitching might adjust, hitting might adjust, or if there's any rule changes, but everything looks good to go. And then incorporating these totals in here, we can have a really, really, really huge MLB season. So super excited about that. All right, next thing I want to do is I want to show you some statistical properties of MLB that I find very interesting. Now, one thing we've always known is that favorites, oops, I don't have the page up. There we go. Favorites win 60% of the time in MLB, and that is dead on the number, 60.5%. It looks like they have right at about, about 250 games played so far for MLB. And you can see Underdogs obviously winning at 39.5%. Now that will run parallel with NHL. So when you see NHL, they call them trends, but again, my term for this is statistical properties. It's a fact about that sport that's consistent for a long period of time. And that's always been true. And look at NHL, you have favorites winning 60 points and 39.4%. Now, the application of understanding that statistical property, and let's just put it in layman's terms, if you have 10 Major League Baseball games in one day, the underdog is going to win 4 of those outright, right? Well, it's just a money line anyways. There's no spread in NHL and MLB. So the point is, you don't have to, but underdogs cash in NHL, underdogs cash in MLB. And like I say, 2 days ago, now we had one last night. It was small plus 102. We had the Yankees. And then the previous day, we cashed. Let me pull this up. Let's see. Previous day, we cashed Chicago Cubs plus 221. We had Toronto plus 119. We lost with the Angels. We had Angels at plus 141, and we won with St. Louis at plus 162. So underdogs are going to cash in MLB. And again, a lot of variance in MLB, meaning like a good starting pitcher could have a bad few innings. You can have a bullpen blow up. So a lot of variance in MLB. So it's very important to incorporate playing underdogs in your handicapping. Let's go back to MLB. I'll show you something really interesting that I don't know was true in years past. I just don't remember seeing this. Take a look at MLB betting trends down there where it says home dogs, 51.2%. So that means an underdog, if you would have played all underdogs at home year to date so far in MLB, you'd have been extremely profitable, because that means underdogs of, anywhere from, I'm assuming they counted at plus 100 up to, whatever the underdog is, plus 200, plus 250. So it's 41 and 39. And I don't remember it being that high. And maybe it was, I'm not sure. I almost want to think that will regress some. And then, so if home dogs is hitting at 51.2%, you can assume that home favorites, and you bump up there to home favorites, 66.3%. So home favorites are winning at a high percentage as well. And obviously, the obvious there, these teams are rested. They're sleeping in their own bed every night. And obviously the home team, traveling on the road, not as comfortable. So very interesting stat there and something to look at moving forward. I'm not sure if it'll stay at 51%. Again, I think it might regress some, but who knows? But anyway, that's a wrap for episode 53, Underdog Sniper Podcast. Greatly appreciate you guys tuning in. Talk to y'all throughout the week. Peace.